Hi everyone, this video is going to be on how to repair a busk, particularly how to fix a popped knob. The most common damage to a busk is basically a knob that has popped out of its hole. So I'm going to film an attempt at repairing this. An important thing to note is that any busk, if it has too much pressure on it, it can have a knob pop off. In lower quality busks, like those made in China, this can happen more often, but even German busks, which usually have a reputation for being high quality, even those can fail. This is why it's so important to loosen your laces completely when you're putting on your corset and when you're taking your corset off. Corset should never be forced, and all the pressure of a corset should not be put only on one pin. Now you can see my corset here, and the lowermost knob had popped off. Here's the little knob there, right there. And what had happened with this busk is that it was sitting too low on my body. Then when I went from a standing to a sitting position, the lower part of the busk hit my lap and sort of bent outwards like that. That caused more pressure on the lowermost knob right there and caused it to pop off. So popped knobs or popped pins, they don't always happen when you are putting on or taking off a corset. Weirder things have been known to happen. I just wanted to let you know that, these things do happen and busks are not invincible. Now, looking at the knob side of a busk, the knob is essentially like a button head rivet. So when you look at it by itself right here, you can see it kind of looks like a mushroom. The wider point here, you can see right there, that is called the factory head when it's part of a rivet. And underneath the head of a rivet is the tail. And I know, it's a very creative name. And the diameter of the tail is just wide enough to fit into the hole of a busk bone right here. And then sometimes, but not always, the end of the tail is distorted in some way, so that it's kind of flattened on the other side or widened in some way so that it can't come out. Sometimes instead of flattening it or distorting it, they will actually spot weld it right there so that the rivet and the busk bone becomes, one single piece of metal. Now, rivets are used for holding two objects together, and that's just in general, not just for busks. And rivets are strongest at holding things together when they have a shear force on them. Now, what a shear force is basically a force that's either that way or that way. It's a sideways force. However, they're not very strong at holding forces against the normal, which is basically up and down. So when some people take off their busk and say the loop catches on like the underside of that factory head right there and pulls outwards in a forcible way, then that can sometimes make a knob pop off. But because they're really good at holding shear forces, then that is why when you pull a busk as hard as you can sideways, it's not going to pop out. So you could probably think of a few different ways of repairing the knob side of a busk. And remember how I told you that sometimes people, when they're actually making the busk initially, they spot weld the rivets into the holes. However, as long as the busk is still inside the corset, I would not spot weld this back into place. What happens when you're spot welding is it involves using heat to melt the metal, which usually takes hundreds of degrees, so it will burn your surrounding fabric. Also, even if you are spot welding, metal is very conductive, and the heat may actually change the characteristic of your busk and even warp it if you use too much heat. So there are cold ways of repairing the busk. So the first thing you can do is just try to hammer it back into place and pray that it will stay. Most likely it won't stay, but in a pinch you really don't have any other choice. And if you have a little rivet setter like I do, then this might be useful because one end of it is sort of concave, so it will prevent the head of your knob from warping or flattening when you're hammering it down back into place. And the other side is nice and flat, so you can hit the hammer there and there's enough length there that you're not going to be, hitting your fingers. Now, if you find that your busk had popped earlier on without you noticing it and you lost your pin, you can replace the pin with a rivet of the same size. Try to find a rather strong rivet, one made out of steel or in the very least brass. When looking for rivets, then try to find one with a tail of at least 3/8 of an inch long. If you find your rivet too long, then you can always cut it down. But if it's too short, then you're basically out of luck, because then the busk loop won't be able to fit underneath the head of the rivet. Alright, so you can see that I have hammered it in, and it is staying in surprisingly well, actually. I kind of surprised myself there. However, if that didn't work for you, if it's still kind of popping out, if it's a little bit loose, then I'm going to still show you how to possibly fix this by opening up the back here. But you will have to indeed either cut a hole or try to remove the busk from the corset before proceeding. Alright, so you can see a close-up here. I've just cut out a very small square here, and you can see that the busk itself is blue. I'm not really sure why, but let's just continue. So you can see that the hole is exposed on both sides. And now you can see that I've hammered in the knob again, and on the other side here it's pretty much flush with the back side of that. I'm going to try and hammer it in just a little bit more, just kind of over hammer it a little bit so that I have more to work with on the back. Alright, so I can kind of catch my fingernail on it, so it's through by a few millimeters. And now what I have here is a center punch, and basically what this does is you use it with a hammer, so the hammer goes on that side, but on this side, instead of it being, you know, concave or anything like the rivet setter is, this is actually quite pointy. So when you put that into the center of the tail end of the rivet, it should hopefully cause an indentation in the end of the tail and cause the metal to kind of splay out in all directions. So let's give it a try. I don't know if you're able to see that, but I used a center punch in there, and it indeed, like, it made a dent in there, so hopefully it kind of splayed things outwards a little bit. I tried to kind of move it in some directions and get it to splay out, and it seems to be not coming out. Like, I'm pulling pretty hard on this, so I'm pretty confident that it's not going to come out, but I'm still going to put some glue on it just in case. What I'm using here is epoxy glue, which is the strongest glue I can find. It comes in 2 separate packs. I cut both packs at the same time and squeeze them out so they will mix in a 1-to-1 solution. I stir the 2 parts together with a toothpick so it'll mix together evenly, and this activates the glue so it will start setting. It sets in just a few minutes, so try to work quickly. Work in a ventilated area as it causes fumes, and try not to touch either part of the glue. I'm putting this mixture over the knob and the busk in an attempt to reinforce them together, although I'm not entirely sure if it will work. I'm also spreading some glue under the flap of the leather so I can press that back down into place. If you're working with a corset made from woven fabric, then you may want to instead whip stitch the flap closed. Ooh, hi guys. No makeup. Anyway, so here I am wearing the corset. And you can see that it's actually holding up quite nicely. And that was the one that I had just repaired. You can see it's not budging at all, so I consider this a success. Now, if you can't find rivets, then another solution is to use machine screws. So you can see here I have a little button head machine screw, and machine screws have a flat tip on their tail, unlike self-tapping screws. So this is a self-tapping screw, and you can see here that it is quite pointy on the end, which would get uncomfortable if it's, you know, like pointing inside towards your body. So try to use machine screws whenever possible. Now, finding a matching size screw, or a matching size rivet for that matter, might be a little difficult to find. And if you can't find one with a tail diameter that will fit in the original busk hole, then you can use the drill to widen the hole. Use a drill bit index from your local hardware store to pick out the right bit for your rivet or your screw. And go slowly when you're drilling so you don't overheat the material around it. When you drill slowly, you might get burrs in the metal, but you can deal with that afterwards. So just imagine that there is a hole in this busk where the pin had popped out and you're replacing it with a screw. When you're putting the screw in, then don't put it right down where the button head actually meets the surface of the busk, because then you won't have enough space for the, the hook side of the busk to, actually like hook through. So just make sure that you leave a little bit of space. So if you're using a screw approximately this length, then maybe screw it in about halfway, I guess. And just for a little bit of added security, what you can do is you can also take a little flat nut like that and screw it onto the screw so that it's on the back of the busk, like it would be sort of like so. And if you find that having a nut on the back of the busk is uncomfortable, then you can always add a boned underbusk to your corset, or fashion just a little pad made out of leather or cotton just to put between your body and this screw nut thing here. Alright guys, so that's pretty much it. So you can see that's very sturdy indeed, and on the back there's a bit of a wound, but if you have a placket beneath the busk, then you don't even notice it. So there you go. You can indeed repair a busk with a little bit of patience and perseverance. So I hope this helped a lot of you guys out. If you did like this video, then please click the like button right there and help support the channel. And I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.